This video is all about how to repair and re-vinyl the side trim panels on a 107 SL, which you might need to do either if yours are cracked or you've bought a car with speaker holes cut in there and you don't want speakers there, or you simply want to change the colour of your car from, say, black to beige or beige to black. One of the things you'll have to do is recover those trim panels, and this video is all about how to do that and also how to repair them. This is the side trim piece that goes along the back bench from our parts car, and the parts car had speakers here, and we don't want speakers there, so we're going to try and fill that hole and recover this with black vinyl. It looks okay from the front, but as with everything else with this parts car, it is pretty damaged on the back there. You can see all those cracks. So we're going to take the old covering off first, and then we're going to glue in any loose pieces, and then we're going to try and cut out a piece that size exactly, or maybe bigger, take out some of these cracks, glue it in there, and then try covering this piece. Just before you ever take anything to pieces, it's a really good idea to make a note of what it looked like before you took it to pieces. So for example, how far over these pieces go. Now we're going to use, hopefully we're going to be able to take that off without ripping it, but we need to see exactly where the corners are cut, because we're no expert on covering stuff with vinyl. We're going to mark each and every one of these bits of broken plastic as they come out, so we can put this jigsaw puzzle back together again. Beautiful hot sunny day here in Bristol, and if you're going to do this, it's an idea to warm up the glue before you start. So I've just left this in the sun for a little while. You could also use a hairdryer. I've got that vinyl off without too many dramas, but as you can see, this is in a terrible state. So what we're going to do first of all is just try and glue these big cracks with super glue, and then we're probably going to try and cut out a larger section here and just glue a piece in rather than just trying to cut out a circle. Now this is also from the parts car and also has a speaker hole in it, but we have this piece that came with the red project car without the hole, so that means that we can use this piece here to cut out our template. It'll be the same thickness of plastic and the same type of plastic, and what we'll do is we will use this section here, which is a flat section. It has the hole in it there for the soft top hood release, but that won't matter. We can either fill that or just leave it as it is, and our template, we can just about cut out a flat piece there like so, and we use an angle grinder to do that. Now I've never tried cutting this plastic with an angle grinder, so I've no idea whether it's all going to shatter and splinter, but what we're going to do is use ultra thin blades. That's a ultra thin disc, sorry, that's a 0.75mm thick disc. Hopefully all I need to do now is just cut the remnants of any fibres that are left. And that should be our piece. Now I've kept the vinyl backing on there because it's less chance of it splintering, and will hopefully give us a cleaner cut. We'll just sand off all the rough edges now. Now this is pretty much an exact fit. So if we were skillful enough to use the angle grinder to cut exactly along those lines, that should in theory fit in there. If you're doing this with metal plate and repairing a car, what you'd actually do is you would tack that over the plastic and use this as a template, and then you know it would be exactly the same. So we may see if we can use a couple of our neodymium magnets to hold that in place. We just very carefully got to take these bits out. Well, we managed to cut that piece out without cracking the whole thing, but our template moved very slightly and has given us some gaps. So here's my plan. I have kind of tack welded the corners where the piece I cut touches exactly using super glue, like a tack weld, and then I've used Gorilla Glue in the gaps, and that will expand into those gaps, and then when that's dry tomorrow we can just shave that off with a razor blade, and that should be fine. It's the next morning and this Gorilla Glue is now dry, and we've used a mixture of super glue to fix the big cracks here. And then we've used some JB Weld to fill in any gaps. We'll just sand that smooth, and hopefully where there's actually bits missing, we'll be able to just sand down the JB Weld. So the first instance, we're just going to use a chisel to take this off. Now here we'll probably find that this has been glued to the cracks here, but we'll just go over that with a little bit of sandpaper. You can see how this JB Weld perfectly fills in any missing pieces of plastic, and that will dry hard and allow us to sand that down if we need to. We could just cover this as is, but I'm just going to go one stage further. I'm going to fill that hole in. It's exactly the same size as a 10p piece. So we'll just cut a piece of plastic out and sand it down. And then we have a little chunk missing here, which we filled in all this bit with JB Weld. And we're going to do the same again overnight, just using a piece of plastic like that and just fill that in with JB Weld just there. And then that will give us a solid edge here. To make that round piece of plastic, we're just going to draw around this 10p piece on an old scrap bit of plastic using a very sharp pencil. What you have to do is just roughly cut that off with a hacksaw or an angle grinder, and then use a sander to get that round. Next up, we're just using a set of mold grips to clamp those two together, and then we're just going to use our finger file to go around the edge to give us a perfect circle. If our calculations are correct, that should be a perfect disc that fits in there. Let's check it out. Not saying that's perfect, but I'll tell you what, that's pretty close. So if you hold that up to the light, you can see it's touching on certain edges, but those gaps there, I'm actually going to use JB Weld to glue that in. That will fill the gaps and give us a solid finish. Plus we just need to mix up some more JB Weld to do this edge here, so we'll do both together. Now I'm probably going slightly overboard on this repair for a piece that you're never going to be seen, but once again I would reiterate, if you're doing any form of restoration work, if you do the job properly on the bits you can't see, and when it comes to doing the bits you can see, you'll probably have a better chance of getting them right. We're just down at the garage and I'm going to test fit that panel before I glue the last bits in. The first thing I've noticed is that this cable here needs to be routed through that hole and out that hole. If you leave it like that, you won't be able to get that panel on. So we'll have to unplug it down under the dash and then re-thread it through. Down at the garage, and this trim piece here, which came with the car, is being held together just by the vinyl. See all these cracks in here, so we'll have to just repair all of that. I'm also struggling to get the piece that we've just glued up to fit, and I think I've just realized why. This side here, this is the bit that fits over the plastic piece. We bought this off eBay because the piece that came with the car was cracked. And one thing I never noticed before is this piece that came with the car is substantially heavier than this. So obviously as time went on, they economized on materials. That's certainly the case with the Mercedes Star at the front. On the older cars, that's made of solid cast metal, whereas on the newer cars it's plastic. But anyway, I've just realized why I'm struggling to get this to fit. If you look at these two pieces here, you can see that this here bends out, so the plastic has to fit. This fits over the plastic, whereas this piece here bends in for some reason. So I've got to very carefully try and bend that without breaking the chrome. You can see that that's actually angled down, and it needs to be angled the other way because at the moment that's hitting the plastic. So yet another job. In order for the holes, there are 3 holes here to line up. You can see that that's not even close to lining up at the moment. If I was to line that hole up like that and come around this way, you can see that that is just basically hitting that piece of plastic, which is probably why it was cracked in the first place. So these need to be just angled out slightly. And that piece of missing plastic there is actually quite important because that's not quite covered by the chrome piece. So we'll make that up with JB Weld. Whoever owned this car before, I can see that they've put in various metal panels down here, which are not 100% lined up. Which is going to make our life slightly difficult. Just got home and realised why they've put this piece of cardboard on there and covered this with not just vinyl but with foam underneath. And the reason is because this one also has a big huge hole and crack out of it, and if I'd known that, I would have actually used that one instead of that one. So I've just cut a big chunk out of the one that's actually reasonably good and left myself with one that needs substantial repairs, which is a bit stupid. We've pretty much glued this one here and also this one here, which is actually from our parts car. So we filled in the speaker hole. We've had to recut another part of that. That's the hole for the soft top release handle. We've repaired various other bits like this. We'll leave that for another day and hopefully come back tomorrow and be ready to cover those in vinyl. It's the next morning and I'm hoping that we have now completely repaired this and we'll be able to vinyl this plastic piece. Now we've used these neodymium magnets to clamp some of these panels together because they are tension and there's slight flex in the plastic. Strange as you do these restorations, never having repaired any plastic at all, I've actually become quite good at it, and that there is as close to perfect as you're likely to get. Once we just sand off those rough edges, that is a smooth finish. Not that you'll ever see it, as I say, because it will be hidden behind the vinyl. In these corners here, I've used a much thicker lot of JB Weld, backed by these cards. Now, these cards will probably be glued on there, so I may just have to. Not glued on. That's good. And we'll just sand this flat, and that'll give us exactly the profile that we need. And then we will pre-drill a hole in there before attaching it, because what normally happens is people over-tighten the screws that attach this to the car and end up shattering the plastic, but we won't make that mistake. Quite useful to know that this plastic does not actually stick if you with JB Weld unless you rough it up. That all fits in there now, so we just need to vinyl this and hope that after we've vinyled it, it still fits in. Having ascertained that our repaired plastic bits all fit, all we need to do is cut out a piece of vinyl and glue it to the plastic bits. My advice is, when you come to cut your piece of vinyl out, make sure you leave a really good minimum 2 inches on every side, because once you start wrapping this around the plastic, etc., it stretches out an awful lot more than you think, and it's very easy to cut a piece of vinyl that's too short. Other thing is, make sure you have got enough glue. I think at the beginning of this project I ordered a box of 6 or 8 of these, and this is my last can. Obviously I didn't expect to have to be recovering these, but make sure you start this job with enough glue because you don't want to run out halfway through. We've put the glue on that side, we're just now going to put the glue on the back of this vinyl. It's all about the timing, and you've got to time this job so that your wife or partner is not in the house, so you can take these bits into the bedroom, because you're probably going to need a hairdryer just to warm up the vinyl when you come to do some of these tighter curves here and here. So I'm going to start off by laying just this edge on and then slowly wrapping that round. We've got the front facing vinyl on without any dramas. Now we just have to go on, trim this to size, cut the corners and little triangles out to help us fold and bend it all around. Put the glue on this side. All we have to do now, if we've got our cutting right, is bend that over and stick it down. The only part that isn't lapped over is this part here where the seat belt goes. So we're just gonna use a scalpel to cut that. Finished putting the vinyl on those two. I'm pleased with how they've come out. We just need to go down to the garage and check that they still fit. And there you have it. Those side trim pieces have come out really nicely. If you've done anything other than 100% perfect job revinyling those, I wouldn't worry too much, because a lot of the difficult parts are going to be hidden behind that bench seat. In the next video, we're going to be sorting out the seat belts on this car. The ones we took off our rusty 450 SL over there were rusty and pretty knackered, so we may end up making up our own seat belts just to match the period of this car. And then once we've got the seat belts in, we've got a snapped cable behind that horseshoe lid. I do have the cable, so I'll do a separate video on how to fix that. Also note that the shock absorbers are not attached properly in there, so we will either replace those shock absorbers or put them in properly. We've just got to do that door card. I've got all the bits for it. It's just a matter of finding the time to do it. And then we are pretty much there on the interior of the car. We got our black vinyl from these guys here in Germany, SJS Car Styling. 27 euros for just over a square meter. I think it's 137 centimeters wide by 1 meter, and they obviously do a range of different colors. This is the stuff you would also need if you were trimming the back of the seats where they have that bit of hardboard. We bought 6 cans of Trim Fix 1 year ago, almost to the date, £30. So that's about £5 a can if you buy them in bulk. And as I say, we've just started our last can now. We were using these Norton extra thin metal cutting discs to cut that plastic. They're 0.8mm thick as opposed to normally about 1mm thick, but they worked quite well for cutting that plastic. The glue we were using to make up parts of plastic was the JB Weld glue, which you can get from Amazon.